welcome back to my channel, or hello if you're new, or a big hello to everybody who's followed this video up from my part 1 of everything I read in 2023. This is my part 2. If you missed the first video, it's linked up there, below and at the end. Without any further ado, let's continue. So carrying on, this is one of the fiction, more contemporary fiction things that I read last year, and I have to say, it's the worst thing that I read all of last year. This book, it's terrible. Wow. I'm actually even impressed with myself that I finished this. I think I read this in about under 48 hours, which is great for me. I'm glad I didn't get stuck in this book because my god, this book is just, it's a pathetic excuse for a book. If you liked it, great, you do you, but for me and the things that I like in the books that I read, this missed every single thing. Most particularly just, you know, being good. The way that it's written is pedestrian. I think the plot is I just think it's just... I wrote notes. This is my note. It is sentimental, predictable, and should have been a play. This is a story about a cafe where if you sit in a certain chair and follow certain rules, that you will be able to go back to the past. You will still be in the cafe, as long as whatever past thing you're looking for happened in said cafe, you can go back. This book is horrendously repetitive. The rules of how you can go back are repeated genuinely maybe 5 or 6 times. It's actually got a bit insufferable reading that over and over and over again. I think that the characters are, you know, they're cardboard cutouts. You give no emotional depth, but you go into detail about what they're wearing, like who cares? Like genuinely who cares? The other thing is when I said that it's not well written. Yes, this is translation, it's a Japanese book, this is translation in English. But there's no excuse for how repetitive it is, so I don't even think that, you know, you can get away with saying, oh, it's a bad translation. It's just boring. The other thing that really grinds my gear is, and this is such a classic mistake, I've been to film school, so one of the things that you see very early on in people's work when they're trying to like tell stories, people conflate drama and trauma. And a classic one is, oh no, someone gets dementia, and like it's so sad they can't remember who they are. The way that it's done in this, like I've had that happen to my family. Like, really? I just, oh no, the mother has the baby but she'll die, and so the only way that she can meet the child is through this, or oh, somebody's sister dies, and it's just like, honestly, you mix up trauma and drama. But the point is, if you don't make your characters interesting, if you don't flesh them out, this is again part of my complaints about If We Were Villains, if you do not make your characters people, I don't care if someone gets hit by a bus, you do not care. And it's the fact that like, oh, the classics are just, you know, oh, somebody's dying, somebody gets dementia, somebody gets cancer, oh, it's really sad. It's not really sad. If you do not care about a character, those things aren't sad. The fact that you feel like you need to go for like those big things shows that you don't know how to actually emotionally engage somebody in a character, because if you care about a character, you can make anything bad happen to them and you'll be sad. You can make a paper cut a tragedy. But if I don't care about this character, you have no emotional involvement. So it's not moving, it's sentimental, it's cheap, by the way. Like it's cheap sentimentalism. It's not even done very well, so it's just cringy and it feels so amateuristic. It's one of these things where it makes me feel like the author themselves have not read good books. These are complaints I've made about other people that I've read, where you feel like they've never read anything good, so they don't know how to write because they make really pedestrian and basic mistakes. You could have been better, but you didn't do the work, and so it's crap. Like, this is just dreadful. I can't get the hours of my life I spent reading this back. That's how this feels. And I'm really shocked that it's so popular and how many like more books of these there are. Because of how popular it was, I was excited to read it. I hoped it was going to be good. No, this is dreadful. It's such a waste of time. Like, for those of you who have ever read anything good, you will know what I mean. If people just haven't read enough of good stuff, then yeah, I'm sure they can think that this is great. Like, oh, it's so sad. Like, no, this is terrible. I generally tend to keep hold of every single book I own. I very, very rarely donate books or get rid of them. This is one I'm genuinely tempted to toss. That's how abysmal I thought this was. It has no redeeming qualities. What was it that I wrote at the time? Repetitive, predictable, sentimental. Yeah, lots of people said it was cozy and heartwarming, but yeah, I thought it was cheap sentimental shots. Early on to Alzheimer's, dead sibling, child you never meet. It's not interesting. There's also the language is boring. It's just, pedestrian is just the word I have for it, okay? It was just, that is a book that is completely inconsequential. I don't want to see that one again. Oh, it's terrible. So because I was so once again disappointed by something contemporary, I then of course turned back to the classics. I have a love-hate relationship with Albert Camus. I feel like more than anything, I can't figure out if I like him or not, his work or not. So I ended up reading The Outsider, and this was really, really good. This was really, really good. This is set in 1940s or 50s Algeria? French Algeria. This is first published in 1942, so this is set in, yeah, French Algeria. It's in sort of two parts of his earlier life and his relationship to his mother, and then this man commits murder, and then it's sort of like him like with the trial and stuff. Oh boy, it's so good. Like, I really, really enjoyed this. Especially because Camus writes in such like an enveloping way that he really brings you very, like, you are then all of a sudden in 1940s like French Algeria. That's where you are. And reading about this kind of place, you just, the way he writes, at least for my brain, lets me be able to make this very vivid and vibrant image of what this place is. Like, I don't know, I could just build a picture of it so easily. And that is part of this whole feeling of like that you're exploring that I really, really enjoy, and this one really, really did that for me. And also I happened to find the first sentence of this book really just strong. I said it at the time. My mother died today. That's the first sentence of this entire book. I just think it's really, really good. It's really, really well written. Nihilism is what Camus was known for. Difficult to wrap my head around, if I'm completely honest. Absurdism has always been a lot easier for me to understand. Yeah, he commits a random act of violence on a sun-drenched beach. His lack of remorse only compounds his guilt in the eyes of society and the law. And oh my, I had thoughts and feelings about this. This is one of my notes. Humans struggle so much with luck, randomness and coincidence. Everything happens for a reason. It's God's plan. No, it isn't. This murder just happened. God implies order and meaning, and it gives a sense of structure. So I guess kind of in that way of like, he does it I guess because he can, almost in a way, right? And this sort of feeling of like there is no order, and this trial, he almost represents that randomness that life can be, where people always seek to order just life, where sometimes life cannot be ordered. We've tried so hard through law, through all those kinds of things, you try and order and control, and you ultimately can't. There's, in a way, there's nothing you can do. So I guess like Meursault, that's his name, the character's name is Meursault, you know, he did it because he could. It'd be interesting to read this like in conjunction with like The Social Contract, which is Rousseau. It's also a question about free will, right? And how much do you do because you feel like you shouldn't, or because, you know, you could. Like, he killed him because he could. That's kind of always the vibe I've got. It's like, almost like you let the impulsive thought win. It also really is a question of faith and belief. This is during the trial. He cut me off, drew himself up to his full height and demanded I tell him one last time if I believed in God. I said no. This is the prosecutor, or is this during... Or this is an interview during the trial, I can't remember. He sat down, looking indignant. He said it was impossible, that everyone believed in God, even those who turned away from him. This was his firm belief, and if he had ever had cause to doubt it, his life would no longer have any meaning. Across the table he was already thrusting the Christ figure in my face and screaming like a madman. I am a Christian. I ask Christ to forgive your sins. How can you not believe that he suffered for you? Yeah, it's so detached and observational. Yeah, emotional detachment from his environment. Meursault kind of feels like a bit like a little sociopath. Empathy is not like a strong word for him. I guess, you know, what literature can let you do is act out the thing that, you know, you're probably, you know, you're not gonna do, but just sort of see like what would happen if you did this and how would this go down. I really, really enjoyed this book. I did not think that I would, but I really, really enjoyed it. And also because this is one of these novels where like you actually have philosophical questions posed to you, explored and thought out, and you can engage with that, and that is so much fun, and I thoroughly enjoy it. I was really surprised at how much I like this, and I really, really, really recommend it. Moving on to something that I also thought was absolutely dreadful. I'm currently writing a short film. It is about a dyslexic 7-year-old. I'm a dyslexic 7-year-old. So I want to do some more reading. I read The Gift of Dyslexia. Bought it on an impulse in a shop because I thought it was interesting. I enjoy the idea of like reframing dyslexia for its positives rather than just being like, oh, it's a learning difficulty / disability. Like, what are like the benefits, you know, what are the perks that come with this package? This is utter shit. This is unbelievable utter shit. There were some points in the beginning I was like, oh, this is promising, and then later I started being like, the fuck am I reading? What the fuck am I reading? And then once it started to dawn on me that somebody who is talking has no fucking clue what they're talking about, and some bits are really condescending, like unbelievably so, that I actually had a look at this Ronald D. Davis. Who is this person? This person is literally just a random dude. This is not somebody who is educated in this, this is not a professor somewhere, this is just a random dude who's like, I'm gonna do this my way and this has worked for me and blah, blah, blah. And like, it hugely purports this idea that you can cure dyslexia. Then like, why is your book called The Gift of Dyslexia? So much shifts like blame onto the child. It's this idea that, oh, you know, you really could work through it and like, you know, you could get over it if you tried hard enough. It's just ridiculous. And what got me obviously was this is a modern cover, so I thought this was a modern book. This book is from like the 80s, 1988. It's ridiculous. Here and there were like bits of where he talked about like the emotional effects of like being a dyslexic child, and that was really interesting. But the rest of it is utter trash. Oh my god, it's unbelievable. Like, I did not finish reading this book because it's so ridiculous. I borderline think it's irresponsible that this continues to be printed. It's what the fuck? It was really bad. Yeah, when you buy non-fiction, I usually do this, but for whatever reason this time I didn't. I think I was like blinded by the idea of like, oh, a gift of dyslexia. Me being dyslexic emotionally still runs really, really deep. That anything that promises, oh, a gift and make me feel better about it, I'm gonna go for, right? This guy used to run like courses or whatever to like help kids cure their dyslexia. What you're doing is you're selling mothers who are desperate, you know, like magic bullets and like magic potions to like fix their children. Like that's what it is. It is terrible. You are taking advantage and capitalizing on like people's desperation and suffering and like hope for their children to just have a better life and do better and all those kind of things. It's disgusting, it is terrible, it's really annoying. I wanted a good book and I got a bad book. But yes, please, for the love of God, when you pick up non-fiction, just double check who the people writing these books are. That book is trash, it's irresponsible, and I hate it. I have good recommendations for you in terms of dyslexia. It's over there. The Dyslexic Advantage. This book is really good. I read Andre Breton, Nadja. I did not like this book. I did not like this book at all. It's surrealism. I feel like I have a better understanding of what surrealism is, but I did not like this. I think, did I read the introduction? I actually read the introduction for this, which I thought was interesting, and I thought the first like few pages of the book were interesting, so I was like, oh, this is promising. And then the way that this book goes is really not for me. One of my best mates is more into surrealism. They really, really love this book, and I just couldn't even identify with the whole idea that it's a love story, because I think it's so fluid and plays so much with like structure and form, and what is a novel, it's got full of pictures. Just because it's words on a page and pages together doesn't make it a book. That's the best way for me to describe this. I as a person struggle with that, so I really struggled through this. It took me over a month to read it, but I didn't want to quit. This, I should have just quit, but I think it's because it was 150 pages and big font. I was like, oh, come on, I can read this. But no, this was really not for me. I think because of the research I did around it to try and understand the book better, I now have a better grasp on what surrealism is, especially from like a fiction and then like art standpoint, which I think is really nice, but otherwise Nadja really, really, really was not for me, unfortunately. But that's fine, you can't love everything, you know. Blending personal confession and enigma, reality and reverie, work from the father of surrealism is, among many things, a meditation on the mysterious, unpredictable Nadja. And yeah, like it is, and it's a lot of like everything. First bits interest me, and then it just kind of got too weird for me, and that's okay. I know what my limits are. Breton is considered like the father of surrealism, so that's, if you do art and those kind of things, he's a good person to read, because that's his philosophy shown through words. I say shown through words, not necessarily the meaning of the words, but maybe the words in conjunction to one another. Does that make sense? That doesn't make any sense. Not as a book, so it's fine. Next up, I went back to non-fiction. I went to somebody who I've kind of always wanted to read, but I think I wanted to start with her most famous thing. I read Joan Didion, Year of Magical Thinking. This is the book that she wrote about the loss of her husband, who she'd been married to for, were they married 30-40 years? He died very suddenly of a heart attack on New Year's Eve while their daughter was critically ill and in hospital, who then also later died. It's the loss of Joan Didion's husband, John, and this is a book on her life, it's a book on grief, just a reflection. It really is, it's her memoir. I read this in conjunction with watching the documentary on her, which is also really good. It touches on a lot of things that this touches on. Because this is one of the very last things that she wrote, it was an interesting way, I think it's a good place for at least my generation to start with Joan Didion, because then we can work backwards. This gave me such an overview as to her style, her story, her values, you know, because it dips so in and out of the professional and the personal, and it's bound together so beautifully that it is just very much just her life. There's no separation really of the private and personal in this, it just is everything. There don't feel like there are any walls in places. In part, thinking about rebuilding her life after the death of a spouse, but then also reflecting on their life together and everything that she did with him. Like, it's also then like in a way part love letter, part memoir. Yeah, Joan Didion was a journalist, a writer. She only died a couple of years ago, so yeah, I really quite like her, and I think she's again more endeared me to American literature and American writing, and all around an absolutely fascinating woman, really well written, very well judged, and I cried a lot while reading this. It just feels very raw, and because she's a writer, she knows, you know, she knows, and she can, it's great. I now am lost, like I've had the loss of the words of what I'm supposed to say, but I think it's really good, and through and through one of the best things that I've read this year. Probably some of the best non-fiction that I've read in a long time. I thought it was gonna be sloppy and sentimental, but it's personal but not sentimental in that like sort of cringe and like, ugh kind of way. It's very much like this is just what happened. She's not trying to do anything with her language to any effect, it just happens because she's just really good at writing. Excellent. And it hurts. So yeah, great place to start if you've never read any Joan Didion, and I'm now going to start working my way back. I already got a copy of her novel, Played as It Lays, so I'm excited to read that, and then I also want to get a collection of essays or like bits of journalism, which is Slouching Towards Bethlehem, which I'd quite like to read. Yes, that one was really good. And yeah, no, it has a special place in my heart. This next one I'm going to skip over quite quickly because it's short and is going in my next video. This is Hemingway, Old Man and the Sea. Told you I was going to read some more classics. Oh my god, I thoroughly like enjoyed this. It's 100 pages, so it's going to go into my short novels to get you into classics. This is brilliant. You know, it's a fable. It is quite literally an old man and the sea and a big fish. Deceptively simple, but incredibly just nah. It was great. That's all I'm gonna say. I thought I might have to like force myself to read it in a way, but in the end I didn't. And I was reading this on holiday. I went to Cancun in Mexico and we were on an island. It was quite fun sort of being like, oh, I'm here and this dude in this boat is meant to be like somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico. That's kind of cool, especially because, you know, just flown over it. I'd never been to Central America before, so that was just really cool. It's like, oh, flew over the Gulf of Mexico. Like, I can now visualise where all of this is set, and like, I have more of like a feeling for this kind of like world that this is set within. That's really cool. So how Hemingway can write something so good about just a man on a boat with a fish? Brilliant. It's so good. Then, so while I was on holiday, I wanted to read something short just to, you know, bump up my Goodreads total, because of course I do. I read Wendell Berry's essay, Why I'm Not Going to Buy a Computer, and I hated this. Oh my god, I really did not like this. What is this? This is from the 90s. I just got really annoyed with this entire like essay, hugely, because it's, oh sorry, hang on, the essay is from 1987. I found that the entire thing was very preachy and ultimately continuously contradictory. It's like he couldn't really figure out what he actually wanted to say, so said a bit of everything and also petty. So Wendell Berry first had that piece published in a newspaper, and then people wrote their letters in response to what he had written, because you like did that in like the past. And so this edition includes some of those letters and then his retort to those letters, and I just like, that's so fucking petty. I find that really petty. A lot of his language was very petty and condescending, and I just did not vibe with it whatsoever. No, really makes me feel like Wendell Berry would be just an unpleasant person. It's giving I'm not like other girls, it's defensive, preachy, and I also wrote you'd not have survived the internet and social media. And then the next one in here was Feminism, the Body and the Machine from 1990, which was, it was about how people perceived what he'd written about his wife and essentially calling out what he'd written about her to be sexist, and then he gets very defensive about it, like, oh, what if my wife just wants to do woman work? And it's just very like, you're like missing the point so aggressively. It's like just flying over your head, and then just gets defensive, and he's so defensive he just doesn't understand what the point was in the first place. Yeah, that was a weird read, and I really like, dude. I think this is the worst one of all of those Penguin timey like modern classics that I've read. That's out and out the worst one. What the fuck even was that? Seriously. It made me mad reading it. I was like, bro, what the fuck is wrong with you? But again, that is absolutely the virtue then of reading those like small ones. Like, I know I will not be reading any Wendell Berry because, bro, no. Next up, I will mention this briefly because I'm again saving it for my other video. I read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I read it. I loved it. I've come round on the romantics and romanticism significantly in the last couple of years, so I feel like now I was ready to read this, and by God, did it not disappoint. I will say, I don't know why I expected the language to be more difficult, but it wasn't. Really enjoyed it. This is really fun. You need to leave the Hollywood Frankenstein you know behind to read this, because if you try and like map it onto what you think it's supposed to be, you're wrong. And this is just really, really good, and I'm so excited to talk about this. I'll talk about it in my next video, but this was an absolute highlight of the things that I read this year, and your girl Shelley loves a framing narrative. At one point you're like 5 layers deep and you're like somebody telling a story but someone else told us that. Just like, girl, where does it end? A friend of mine is like currently writing something, and some of the feedback someone else gave them was like, you've got too many like layers of framing narrative, like this is stupid. I'm like, well actually Mary Shelley did about like, she got like 6 levels. She got like 6 or 5 levels deep at one point. It starts, come on get this, it starts with somebody, like a ship that's like in the Arctic, and they drag somebody out of the water. It's great, it's so good. And I'm going to have to pause here because I need to go to work. I'm going to come back when it's dark, so just bear with. Bit of mood lighting for you. Carrying on, one of the really absolutely best things that I read last year, that this is also one of those that's, you know, kind of fucked me up. Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar. This is one that I also have always kind of wanted to read, but I stayed away from it, especially younger, because like I said, I had some troubled mental health years as a teen. I figured this probably wasn't going to be in my best interest to read, and I have to say I'm really pleased with myself that I, or like, you know, just happy with how it panned out that I read it as an adult. My focus is here, focus to my face. Hello, do you mind? Focus on me. Focus on me. If any of this is out of focus, it is what it is. Sylvia Plath's Bell Jar is Sylvia Plath's one and only novel. I recently bought a collection of her poetry curated by Ted Hughes, who is also a poet, and her husband. So Sylvia Plath took her own life when she was 31, had a young child. It's this very semi-autobiographical. It wasn't published posthumously, but she took her life like a few months later. Yeah, just terrible. This is like one of like my favourite things that I've ever read. It's not for you if you're a girly struggling with your mental health. It's just, no, I would say put it down, give it a decade, come back to it. You don't need to read this now, because I feel like had I read this then, I think because of the state that I was already in, it would have just given, like, it would have, I feel like it would have encouraged me, because I would have read it in that way. I was gonna say read it wrong, but I didn't, you know, subjective, whatever. But I would have let this encourage me rather than now as a much more of a grown-up being able to look at it and go, okay, you know, if you're struggling with it, no, not the book for you. There are many more books for you, but this is maybe not the one for you. Come back to this. I love friends who said that they read this when they were really at the same life stage. Esther Greenwood is like leaving university, she's starting her first job, I think she was doing an internship, she's trying to find her way in the world, but then also like really doesn't want to. So she's somebody who's like really at this crossroads of, I could become anything, am I going to be anything? Or am I going to completely waste my life? Or that's sort of where she's at, and the way that she struggles, the way that she loves New York, enjoys the time she has there, but also like doesn't, kind of is almost like playing a version of herself, and just sort of his days that she's like exploring New York in, which is semi-autobiographical because Sylvia Plath also did an internship at, I think she did an internship at Vogue, which is similar to then what her character does. It's very funny. It really is very tongue-in-cheek. It's, the back says, razor-sharp wit, really is. And it's just very enjoyable, and I just think if I was one person before I read this and I was another person after it, when it comes to like being a young woman and figuring out who and what you want to be, that like nauseating anxiety of being in your early 20s, like Sylvia Plath just got it. Like this book just gets it in a way that so many of things just don't. And it is, you know, you can link this author to female, like female rage and stuff, like it's a maddening experience. And I think Plath just takes that like a step further, shall we say, in her writing, but it's so well written. Like she doesn't miss, you know, she just doesn't. It's everything about it is just brilliant, which is, you know, it's so painful that this is the only novel she ever wrote. Oh, it just sucks. No, Plath is absolutely brilliant, and The Bell Jar, it's absolutely not overrated. People say it is. It is not. If people say that it is, it's maybe because they haven't struggled with something like that, or they are not a young woman. I love this in a lot of the same reasons that I loved My Year of Rest and Relaxation. I think I did a video where Editing Me made a joke about the fact that Rest and Relaxation kind of wants to be The Bell Jar, but without trying to be it, or like almost nauseously trying to be it, you know, like that's what I quite like about that, but I would definitely like group those together. Yeah, I know, it's one that everybody says you're supposed to read, and then I'm like, oh, I don't want to read it, everyone's saying I'm supposed to read it. It's brilliant. It's so good, and like, you know, Esther is honestly just a dick, and that just makes it exceedingly entertaining. What Plath does in this with her character is what I bang on about that so many people make mistakes with, is that I don't like Esther Greenwood. I don't like her. And she just does the terrible things that we all think about doing, but then maybe don't. She's kind of living out the impulsive, intrusive thoughts that I tell, you know, we don't actually end up doing. Think about doing them, we don't do it. For example, through her multiple suicide attempts. And then even just sort of a sense of like right at the end, the character that she's institutionalized with at the end, the attitude of the fact that that girl takes her own life, it's very much one of, bitch did it before I could, or she did it for attention. It's just, it's dreadful. It's so good. I really recommend it for the girls who have just sort of finished the stage of life of graduating university and being nauseous trying to figure out who you are, even though that kind of never really stops. One of the most famous passages from this book is the passage about the fig tree, where she's saying, trying to look for it, I don't think I can find it. She uses a metaphor of a fig tree, this idea that she sees these figs start to grow, and each fig represents a different way that she could go, whether it's to be a mother, or to be a wife, or a professor and an academic, or a journalist and editor, and not have a family, like have like all of the options that she could do and everything she could be as a woman, and then because she feels like she can't commit to any single one of them, she never chooses one, and then all of these figs like wither and die and fall off the tree, and then she's left with nothing. That is so stressful. Like makes me like sweat kind of stressful, okay? I'm just so lucky in that sense that I know exactly what it is I want to do. But fuck, you wonder if you can do everything. Like, that's just what it feels like to be a woman. I had a lot of thoughts to say about this book. So many. So many. And it's funny when she sits down to like, she's like, oh, I'm gonna write, that's what everybody does, I'm gonna write, and then she just sits down, she can't write at all. All through June, the writing course has stretched before me like a bright, safe bridge over the dull gulf of the summer. Now I saw it totter and dissolve, and a body in a white blouse and green skirt plummeted into the gap. Like, I've done that before, the idea of like lining things up, and that's like your safety. You know, this whole idea that you line, you know, all of your next things up, and you feel like you have your ducks in the row, and then you get rejected from something that you were so confident and cocky that you just couldn't believe that that would happen to you, and then it does, and you're just like, oh fuck, and all the structure dissolves and all of your like safety net dissolves, and it's terrifying. It's really how university ending has felt for me. It's not horrible. If it's something I've written here, one of the lines is, I had never spent a summer in the suburbs before, and my note was about virgin suicides. Oh yes, super claustrophobic. It's just excellent writing, and it's just an excellent story, and like, while it may not be your cup of tea, it's one of those things that I feel like most people could probably appreciate for how well it is done. One of these things that is ever so deserving of being called a classic. This is what it feels like to be a modern woman. This book is from the 1960s, but it's still completely bang on. Sylvia just knew. Next up, we've got Nora Ephron. I remember nothing. I bought this on a whim. I bought her book collection of journalism and essays. I feel bad about my neck. It's on my desk, I still haven't read it. I still haven't put it into a book haul. Nora Ephron wrote Harry Met Sally, Sleeps in Seattle, lots of other things. So I bought some of her essays, and honestly, they're fun, they're light, they're nothing spectacular, but they're just nice for what they are. I don't think they try and be highbrow or particularly intellectual by any stretch of the imagination, and it's hugely centred around food. Nora Ephron also wrote the book Heartburn, which got turned into a movie. I bought Heartburn, where did I put it? Did that ever go into a haul? The problem is I acquire books at such a speed, but there's so many that I just miss. I have many books, but that's, as we know, this is what it is. Lots of these like essays and pieces are very just light, and I think I enjoy her more, obviously less light pieces, but I think the bit I enjoyed the most was that she does talk about film. I really wish there was more of it in here, but there's a couple where she talks about film, she talks about movies, and there's one bit that I read and I was like, oh god. She has an essay about when you've got a flop and how it's humiliating and embarrassing and how you just don't want to go outside. And more than anything, that she was saying that, you know, you obsess over it and you try and figure out who could possibly be to blame, and like you re-edit in your head, you recast in your head, you rewrite in your head, but at the end of the day, when it comes to filmmaking, if you have a bad movie and you're the director, it's always your fault. And I do believe that, but it's like, when this is like what you do, it's just a horrible, this is a horrible position to be in, where you're like, oh god, yeah, if it's crap, like kind of is always going to be my fault. Even if it means that if editing's bad, it means that I hired the wrong editor. If the acting is bad, it means that I hired the wrong actors and clearly didn't direct them very bloody well. You as a director made wrong decisions. I feel like I could probably get away with blaming more on a producer, but yeah. I read that and I was like, oh my god, I feel so seen. Easy reading. But that's all it is. I feel like I have little to critique it on. I feel like I personally prefer writing that's maybe a bit heavier, I guess. I don't read very much light stuff. I just read the Bell Jar, for God's sakes. It's not like my cup of tea, but I don't think it's one of these things I can critique it for. It's a good, lovely little thing in its own right, but that's it. I really do like Nora Ephron. I'm quite excited to read her other book, the one that I bought. The thing is, you should never do this though. You should never buy 2 books by an author before you've read either of them. So, you know, if this sucked, like, what was I going to do about the other book? I'm like, do I want to read it? Do I want to not? She's very entertaining. I do quite like her. And now finally, the very last thing that I finished last year, which is over Christmas, was Somerset Maugham up at the villa. It's like 100 pages. This lady has gone to take some time in the air at a Tuscan villa while she sends away her suitor, who's significantly older than her, to ponder on if she wishes or no to accept his marriage proposal. And then shit hits the fan with a crime that is committed, but she didn't do it, but now she needs to commit another crime to colour up the crime she didn't do, because she's gonna get blamed for the fact that it looks like she did do it. And then how that like gets very much wound together with a more unsavoury character in the book that she's met at a dinner, and how they then become accomplices to one another in this whole thing. Oh, it was very fun. It's like 100 pages. It reads really way more like a movie script. There is a film adaptation of this. Apparently it's not very good. This is exactly how I imagine the lady in this. What's her name again? Mary? Yes, Mary Panton. This is exactly how I see her. So this is ASAP casting, but yeah, apparently the film is very good. But the book is very like entertaining. I read this in a couple days, so most of you will be able to read it in a day if you fancy. It's something that you can get away with reading, and we read it by the pool. Really just read it by the pool. I do think this was a very like fun little foray into Somerset Maugham, and I really now want to read his more famous things of Human Bondage and things like The Moon and Sixpence. I want to read those and see how I go. But this is, you know, if you're in the mood for that more like 1940s kind of sort of thing, this will be up your street. I'm also currently reading Wuthering Heights, which I'm thoroughly enjoying so far. Really enjoying. Oh yeah, the other books that I like half read this year, A Chunk of the Way Through Jerusalem. I've read half of the book you wished your parents had read, and then I read half of another book which I still need to finish, which has been written by someone I know, so I just need to finish that. And oh, I've already read Eileen this year by Tessa Moshfegh, which is the book she wrote before she did Rest and Relaxation. It's not as good as Rest and Relaxation, but you can sort of see where the groundwork is being put. I think it was the first 200 pages are kind of like, where is she going with this? Kind of bored. And the last 60 pages are like, whoa! I'm probably gonna be stuck in Wuthering Heights for a little while, but I feel like, you know, it's one of those books that, you know, then I've read Wuthering Heights, so I don't really care how long it takes, and that's very nice. Maybe I'll read Jane Eyre a little bit after that. I thoroughly enjoyed all the classics that I like got through this year. I was very proud of myself for it, especially like The Bell Jar. That's shaped me. But yeah, I'm proud of myself for the things I read this year. There's no fairy smut among this, so Jem Maas is apparently releasing a new book, so I feel like I can now justify reading the last one that I've got, because I don't want to waste it. You know, it's like 600 pages, so I'm like, I want to enjoy this so much, and I don't want to read it if there's like nothing else coming out yet. I'm saving it. That is everything that I read in 2023. I'm going to do my best for this video, not take a million years to go. Very proud of my 4,000 and something pages, and it's so fun putting all of my books on my bedside table sort of shelf and like seeing them stack up, and the fact that I got to like fill the entire shelf is like so exciting for me. I feel like my mind has grown with all the books I have read, and I've thoroughly enjoyed myself. Do let me know what your favourite things that you read last year were, or things you're looking forward to reading this year. Let me know. Just let me know how you guys are. I'm nosy, I always want to know. But yes, thank you very much for watching. Like, subscribe and all the jazz, and I will see you very soon. Goodbye.